And welcome to the International Desk. I'm Lynda KInkade. We begin with fallout from US President Donald Trump's latest comments on Saturday's deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, again insisting that both sides are to blame. Headlines around the country are now blasting Mr. Trump for saying demonstrators against racism share responsibility with those protesting the removal of a statue which honoured a man who fought to keep African Americans as slaves. Well, meanwhile, a memorial service begins next hour for Heather Heither. These are live pictures from where the memorial will take place shortly. The woman was killed when a right-wing supporter rammed his car into a crowd of counter-protesters. Well, new plans are fast emerging in other cities to take down similar statues honouring the losing side in the American Civil War 150 years ago. Well, Mr. Trump initially blamed the violence on many sides. He came under fire for that, and for failing to denounce the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists by name. 2 days later, Mr. Trump read a statement that specifically called out those groups. But during an unrelated news conference on Tuesday, he was again spreading the blame.
McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have, you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
Those people, all of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
About race relations in America, and do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten better or the same. Look, they've been frayed for a long time, and you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. And what I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
President Trump speaking there at that press conference. Well, let's get more on the fallout. Senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny joins us from outside Trump Tower in New York. Jeff, President Trump says he wanted to wait for the facts. He abandoned that carefully worded, prepared statement from Monday, and we heard that rambling press conference, which sounded like there were gasps in the room as he spoke. Has there been any reaction this morning from the White House or from Trump Tower?
Lynda, the White House realizes that this is another headache that the president has created. The fact that he, the idea for that whole event yesterday was to move on beyond this conversation of Charlottesville, to move beyond the attacks from last weekend. And they thought he had done that. He was supposed to be talking about infrastructure and his agenda going forward, but instead he vented very publicly what he had been doing privately, we're told, behind the scenes. So this morning, the advisors that we're talking to, they are trying to get back to work, they said. One administration official told me, says, we have a job to do, we're going to do it. But the silence overall, Linda, I would say is the most striking thing this morning. Not a word yet of comment or reaction from the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, who's a senior advisor to the president as well as his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Both are of the Jewish faith. Both are, would have been the subject of some of that same hate speech that was being shouted on the streets of Charlottesville. But again, the White House in a bit of disbelief here. It was the president taking matters into his own hands yesterday, and now they're trying to clean that up, Linda.
And Jeff, at that press conference, we also saw President Trump's new chief of staff, who is a 4-star general. He fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. It was hoped that he would help the president govern. We're just looking at this picture of him listening to that press conference yesterday. He looks defeated.
Sure. I mean, that picture really does tell 1,000 words there. That's General John Kelly, who is, the new White House chief of staff. He was brought in to restore some order, and in many respects, he has. He's controlled some of the processes, some of the staff he's brought under control. But he's not there to control the president. The reality is he's the chief of staff. He's not in charge of the president. In fact, no one is in charge of the president. This was full-on, real-time Donald Trump. Yesterday, as we saw him many times during the course of his presidential campaign, and many times indeed in his public life before becoming president. The only difference is he is now president, and his words carry much more authority and weight. And one thing that's lacking, many Republicans and critics believe, is moral authority that a president of the United States often has. That was lacking yesterday, Linda.
And Jeff, it seems that only a very small handful of Republicans are willing to come out and publicly criticize the president and name him.
That's true in some respects. Senator John McCain certainly has no problem criticizing this president directly. They've been engaged in quite a back and forth over these past many months. Several Republicans did come out and say, there is no moral equivalence between the two sides, as the president said, of the protest. But we are getting word this morning from our CNN's Manu Raju on Capitol Hill that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is privately very disturbed by this, and we look for him to be issuing a statement later today as well here. So, of course, this is nothing that Republicans want to talk about. They want to talk about the president's agenda, but of course they are indeed being asked about this, and that will continue because this is at best a distraction, at worst showing the divisions and divide on race and other matters that of course exist here in the United States. Linda.
Jeff Zeleny outside Trump Tower in New York, thank you very much. Good to have you with us.